Streaming live around the world, this is Paper Cuts with Brad and Jay.
I'm the one you love. I'm Jay. Thanks so much for stopping by. Over there's Brad. It's his show.
It's his show. That's why I'm the host, and we just love Jay.
Now you know it's all natural. I mean, nothing's rehearsed, right?
No, absolutely nothing is rehearsed on this show.
God, you just suck the life out of me. It feels like
you've got a lot grayer since we started this.
I have. I know. I have.
Tonight, we welcome to the program Michael David Wilson.
That dude has 3 first names. We are live.
Happy Friday. Good evening, everyone. Okay, I should say good evening to most of you, because not only are we hitting the airwaves about an hour earlier, but one of us in this group here is actually in the future.
They are.
And they refuse to give us the winning lottery numbers. So we need to discuss that. But before we get too far, Brad, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a second. You went to an event.
Oh, yeah?
You went to an event this past week.
I did.
Right. And little birdie told me.
Butcher Cabin Books.
Right. You were there representing the show.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a few spies there. They told me, dude, he didn't mention you once.
I did.
He took credit for the whole show. It was his idea. He does all of the work. It's all him. People were like, "Hey, Brad, you have a great show, Paper Cuts." I was nowhere in the conversation, so I'm calling you out.
I was actually trying to get a
right
new
now.
co-host. Is what I was trying to do.
I figured that's what it was. Well, okay.
I was begging Laurel, and she just was like, "No, I can't do that."
So
But
this will be our final episode.
We're gonna end on number 69. That's a good one to end on, right?
That's what she said. Anyways, good evening, everybody. I'm Jay. That's Brad over there, and we're going into the future. We are going into the future. With us this evening, Michael David Wilson. That's right. He's got 3 names. So if you want, to just, if you forget one of them, just start yelling out names and he'll answer to something. But you're in Japan right now, right?
That is right. Yeah. And I gotta say, like, I've listened to and watched the show a number of times, but I haven't watched the intro video a lot before. And I was getting pumped up. I thought this is kind of like Attitude Era WWF Raw. I thought I might have to fight someone as soon as we went live.
Well, the thing is, we've used that all season. Like for the past 2 seasons, we've used that, but it's been like the last 4 or 5 episodes, people have just noticed it. Right?
Because you've been saying dumb stuff in it, is what you've been doing at the end. But
well,
David Joyce said the same thing. He was like, it felt like I was watching a wrestling event or something like that.
Yeah.
I need to change it up, but we've used that one for probably what 2 or 3 seasons now, and I just put in the name. But
seasons in air quotes.
Like how long is a season?
Very loose seasons for us.
Yeah.
They quit checking the baseball games. I know that's what you're doing.
No, I'm actually checking our seeing anybody's in our chat right now. My baseball season's over, buddy. It's my baseball season's done. So, Michael David Wilson, thanks so much for stopping by. We appreciate it. Now, you have your own show. This is horror, and you have been, popping up here and there, being interviewed for this new book that you have that came out about a week ago. What made you decide to slum it with Paper Cuts?
I'm very much kind of watching all the different videocasts and podcasts and seeing who's like doing decent things within the scene. So I know that we didn't set this up. You didn't pay me any money or anything like that. But, I think you're both doing good work. You're launching a lot of books as well, like Laurel Hightower the other day and Bo Johnson. They both came on your show to launch their new releases.
Bo threatened us. That's why he had to come on the show. I mean,
we're scared of Bo.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it's done in the biz. That's a little insider tip. If you want to go on a podcast, then you might want to consider threatening the host. It doesn't always work. Particularly, that's why I've got like the co-host Bob Pastorella. He's quite a big Texan guy, so he's immune to being threatened.
Right.
But if it was just me, it's like, I'm about as intimidating as like a slice of corned beef. It's not really gonna threaten you a lot. But
we do some research to see how intimidating corned beef can really be.
I mean,
I like corned beef.
you like it, but you're probably not afraid of it.
intimidated by
you
it.
know?
Not afraid of it. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I try to go for. It's like people like me, but they're ultimately not afraid of me. So
That's probably a good thing though that everyone's not afraid of you though.
yeah, I guess so.
So you're
But
saying your co-host Bob is the muscle then, right?
that's basically what I'm trying to say.
You can run your mouth. You just run behind him. If you have like a hard hitting interview with someone, and they meet you out in public, you're like, "Well, hold on, let me grab my co-host, step behind." Okay, I got it.
To pull the book in,
Yeah.
Michael is Frank, and then his co-host is either Slutter or Butcher.
Yeah.
Whichever one you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, I haven't even meant to do this, but there have been times before where I've come on a podcast. I talk Bob up. I like call him the prize fighter. It's like, look, you want to have a fight. It's like if we're going to go back to the WWE and pro wrestling, it's like I'll be his Paul Heyman and he'll be my and that's kind of what
Nice.
So let's talk about this book real quick, House of Bad Memories.
Mhm.
And you actually landed this with Cemetery Gates Media. So that's it's pretty I mean, I think they're pretty big as far as the independent scene goes. So how did that whole connection happen?
So I mean, House of Bad Memories, it has been one that I started writing a number of years ago now. So it's very much a novel of two halves. And for people who have read it, they might be able to see where those distinct halves kind of start and finish. I mean, where the second half finishes is pretty obvious. It's the end of the book. But
wait. That's the groundbreaking discovery right now.
Yeah. But
it's a soundbite.
Yeah. But the originally it was a novella. It was actually gonna be published by another publisher, but there were some things that didn't really work for me, so I got the rights back. And then when I got the rights back, I was considering what it was that I wanted to do with the novella at the time. And my film manager, Ryan Lewis, I'd shown him the original novella. He liked it, and he said he just couldn't quite see, though, how he could sell the film rights easily because it was quite an understated, minimalist location British thriller.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, I reckon I can expand this a little bit. And I think that I can certainly make it less minimalist. Maybe I can make it more commercial and more sellable for the screen. So I started planning something out. The thing is that, like, yeah, one might be able to make it more commercial, but that's not what I write. So
Yeah.
I simultaneously, made it. I mean, I expanded it. I would say that it changes genre at several points anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And then definitely I made it less commercial, particularly because of a certain chapter 22. I'm looking at you. You can't put that on the screen, but maybe that's the challenge, to a director. It's like, you couldn't film that. And they're like, oh, yes, we can. I mean,
It could be referred. It could be referred to. Yeah. You just made a sell, by the way, in the chat, just so you know.
Oh, nice.
Kelly picked it up on.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I hope that you enjoy it.
So you had it as a novella, and it was finished as a novella originally.
Yeah.
And you decided to go back. How much did you have to add to get it into the novel world?
I mean, literally, there's the novella, the original novella ends, and then there's another 35,000 words. So, I just added all new material, expanded the story. And then, of course, in the editing, like in my editing process and like redrafting, I then foreshadow different things that happen. So put that into the front of the text too. So a lot of work went into it and making sure that all of the pieces line up. And so, I mean, I want to create something that's unpredictable. And from a lot of the feedback, that seems to be the case, that a lot of people didn't
Right.
predict where it was going. But I want it to be that if you then reread it, there are just these little hints as to what's going to happen. So, I mean, to answer your original question, as is tradition in an interview, so when I
Or
then
don't. I mean, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing goes normal on the show. So
when I then expanded it to a novel, I'm thinking about my different publishing options. Cemetery Gates Media, I had a short story published, Teka Teka Teka, in their anthology Places We Fear to Tread.
Mhm.
And, Joe Sullivan seemed like a decent guy. He pays quickly, he's professional. He's got kind of all the things that I would want from a publisher. So sent him the novel. He seemed to like it. Here we are.
just like
It's
that.
always nice when the publisher actually pays your writers, right?
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, something new.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how hard was it? So you had the novella and it was finished. Then you added the second part. How hard was it finding the right spots to go back in the first part to weave a few things in there to make it all connect? Because I mean, you said you were editing your part of it. You had to go back and add a few things in the first part to make it. How hard was that? Remembering where things go and trying to make the proper connection.
I mean, I am so meticulous when it comes to redrafting, to the point where when I got the audiobook narrator, he asked if I could give him just some brief character notes.
Mhm.
Now, most people would do that off the top of their head, and that's probably a sensible approach. It's definitely a time effective approach. I decided specifically to give the narrator these notes. I would meticulously reread the entire novel, which at that point it's been edited, it's going out, there's nothing that can be changed, just so I can give him as accurate information on all of these characters. I don't know really if it's going to help with his narration. If I'm like, oh, well, in this scene, Gaza is wearing an Adidas jacket, that probably isn't going to affect his voice. But I wanted to give as precise detail as possible. So when I'm redrafting, I'm not just scanning over. I'm looking at it. I'm reading it aloud. I'm making sure that everything is exactly where I want it to be. I mean, I can become pretty obsessive about it, which is why at some point you just need to send it off, because I could tinker with a sentence again and again. I mean, when I go back and I reread different parts of my books, usually to prepare for a reading, I'm not like,
Right.
oh, well, I fancy a good book today. Seems like I
Need a
wrote
good
one.
book. Let's
But-
try my second book here.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
but that there'll be sentences or passages that I would now do differently. I mean, and I think it's a little bit like, that there's this phrase that you can never step into the same river twice. And I kind of feel that, like, you can't write the same book twice, even if James Patterson would be like, well, let me fucking try and and see about that.
There are exceptions to that. So,
But I mean, because like I am always in a different place in my life. If I were to write the girl in the video now, it would be different to when I wrote the girl in the video, whenever that was, probably
Right.
2018, something like that. And even now, when I've written House of Bad Memories relatively recently, if I were to write it today, it would be a different book.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was that difficult to go and slot these things in, because like I'm really, every read I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. And I think that there was about a year, maybe more, between the first and the second half. So actually, while I'm going back, I can go back in a more objective way. I mean, you can never be fully objective. It's like I'm the writer of this, but I think, yeah, I had a sense as to, okay, these are the things I want to foreshadow, so then I could just slot that in as organically as possible. And I mean, may well have helped too that, I co-wrote They're Watching with Bob Pastorella.
Mhm.
So then when I'm going through that, I'm just making sure everything is cohesive, and you can't actually tell which parts Bob wrote and which parts I wrote. You need everything
That's
to
always
be
cool in a
seamless.
collaboration, by the way, because like if you start learning how certain people write and they collaborate, you can tell what they wrote. But whenever you can blend them together, and the reader does not know where it switches, the narrators or whatever, that's always pretty cool to mix things up
Yeah.
some. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with They're Watching as well is, even though Bob and I would write, like, I'd write a section, then he'd write a section, two things. So first of all, we both went over every single sentence multiple times. So it doesn't matter if Bob or I started writing it. By the end, even on a sentence by sentence level, it could have been a collaboration. And also, when I say we wrote sections, I guess different collaborators do it in different ways. So certainly a traditional way is that there might be two main characters, and then one collaborator takes one takes the other.
Right.
Or it might be like, I'll do this section, you do the next. Or the way it worked with Bob and I, we came up with a plan, and then I'd have my writing session, and there might be a set amount of time that I've got, could be 90 minutes on that particular day. Then when I finished, I hand it back to Bob. So that could be mid-chapter. It's not like I have to finish a certain amount, or he has to finish a certain amount. So it made it, I guess, a more authentically collaborative experience.
It's almost like you guys are finishing each other's thought almost.
Yeah.
If it's like mid paragraph or mid chapter or whatever, that can be risky, but that's also pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the thing is that because we're going over everything, I would say, rather than being risky, it was just creatively interesting, because it's not like if Bob puts something down, it's like, right, that is now in it. Absolutely. And the same with me. Like, there were times when we would argue our case and we would disagree, and then, we just have to fight it out. Not physically. We've been through that about 10 minutes ago, but intellectually we would fight it out.
So I want to ask about you adding so much more to House of Bad Memories. Obviously, the story changed with you adding everything in, but is the core of the story still the same as what the novella was, as to what is with the novel now? So the core, plot line with it, or did the story kind of drastically change too with adding everything else?
I mean, the original novella is pretty intact and is how it was initially.
Okay.
But the second half, I would argue that it switches genre, and then it switches genre again pretty near to the end. So of course that is a change. I mean, everything I write, it seems to be in this dark fiction mode, but then there's different subgenres. I mean, whatever I do, it's gonna be dark, it's gonna get a little bit fucked up, and there's also going to be humor. And that is just the way that I operate. I have tried before to write dark fiction or straight horror, and I can't help but throw a few jokes in or do something a little bit amusing. That is just how my mind works. Equally, there have been times where I've tried to write a more straight comedy as going nicely, and then I do something weird. I do something messed up, and that is just part of my nature, I suppose. My nature as a writer. I'm not like saying like it's like I teach as a day job. It's not like in the class, like, I'm going to do something a bit fucked up. It's like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
I think
That's
it
it.
works when it comes. I think it works
Yeah.
when it comes naturally though. Like if you don't, if you set out to do a horror or dark fiction, and a joke just comes, I think it's more natural as opposed to I'm going to start out with pure comedy, because then that comedy is forced and it's over the top. It doesn't work. At least that's the way my brain looks at stuff. So, but yeah, when it comes naturally in a certain situation, then I think it works better.
Yeah. I think whatever you do, you have to do it authentically. I think
Right.
that
Mhm.
is the key. So when I spoke about trying to make things more commercial, it's like anytime I have tried to do that too consciously, it fails, and I just have to abandon the story or go back to the beginning. I think that in terms of making something commercial, that is something that can come in more with the marketing rather than with the actual writing.
Right. Right.
I you have to be authentic, you have to be true to yourself, and that is what you're getting with my fiction. And I think every release is a little bit kind of more authentic, more pure Michael David Wilson release, for better or for worse. And I mean, with the book that I'm working on at the moment, because it's always fun to start trying to promote a book that isn't even out yet and probably won't be out for a year. It's definitely like more in the House of Bad Memories vein, because I kind of see the girl in the video and they're watching as a pairing, and then I
Mhm.
see House of Bad Memories and the current one that I'm working on, which is called Daddy's Boy. Well,
Whoa.
that one is more comedic. You can probably tell from the title. So I think with House of Bad Memories, I would call it a dark thriller with comedic elements, whereas Daddy's Boy, it's a dark comedy. That one I have lent more in to the comedy, and I mean I'm pitching it as the Greasy Strangler meets a Joe R. Lansdale heist novel set in broken Britain as directed by Guy Ritchie. That's
Okay.
kind of the
Well,
pitch
that's
for
a lot
that
to take
one.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about the comedy though. I think comedy, when in horror or dark fiction or whatever, I think they blend really well together. They always work really well because you have the
Yeah.
sort of the levity of the joke, and then something scary or really horrific or whatever happens. It's like the balance. You're the balance of emotions. You're going from one extreme to the other. So I always think comedy works really well with dark fiction or horror or whatever.
It breaks up a little tension too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breaks up the monotony of just the gloom and doom and all that stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, it is a balancing act because you want to
Mhm.
break up the tension, but you don't want to take it
You wanna
so
go
far
overboard.
that
yeah, you don't want to
then
steer totally away from it, definitely. But yeah, you want.
yeah. So that is the challenge that I'm having with the current novel that I'm writing. But that's why I think, I got to lean into the fact that it is more a comedy. So it's almost
Mhm.
like you occasionally break up the comedy by creating a horrific moment. So it's now the opposite thing.
Stop the comedy, throw a murder in there. What? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're getting pretty close. Have you read this one? Did you hack into my
I
computer?
might have.
He's
Yeah.
That's
he's
a
got
different
spies in
discussion.
Japan
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, House of Bad Memories. Where did this concept come from? I know you added another part to it, and it was a novella first. But as far as the story, the content, is this something you were messing with a few years, or did it come together pretty quick? The whole concept, or is it autobiography in some way? I mean, I don't know. I mean, because there's some deep
If
things in
this is
here.
an autobiography, that would be terrible.
Well, I mean, there's like just dysfunctional things happening, and a lot of chaos. What's the inspiration behind this story? I guess I'm asking.
So I think Brad is going to be a little bit surprised by my
Oh no.
answer here. But there's a few parts to that, as there is to nearly everything I answer. People might be picking up on this now. But in terms of the initial inspiration and seed of an idea, one of my good friends, fellow writer, former This Is Horror podcast co-host, Dan Howarth, he was putting together an anthology. I believe the concept is pareidolia. I've never actually pronounced that word, only seen it written down. But this idea of kind of seeing things in everyday objects, like when you see some bizarre article like, oh, I saw Jesus Christ's face in my fried egg.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
on my piece of toast. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was putting an anthology together with his co-editor James Everington about this kind of pareidolia concept. And so I started thinking, well, is there a short story I can write about this? Which is where the idea of our protagonist Denny seeing his deceased stepfather Frank came into play. I quickly realized that the answer to whether I could write a short story on this for Dan's anthology was no, but I did have a novella idea. This is how a lot of my ideas turn up. It occurs to me now because the girl in the video, that was initially because Max Booth had an anthology, Lost Films, and then the idea spiraled into a novella. So the takeaway is that I can be all right coming up with ideas, but putting them into a short story form is a little trickier. So that was the initial inspiration. But actually, I mean, I said that House of Bad Memories is a novel of two halves, and that there is autobiography and kind of mining personal experiences. The first half of House of Bad Memories is me essentially tapping into my childhood and my childhood trauma and processing, some things and some aspects that went on there. Whereas the second half is me tapping into and processing trauma from my recent divorce and custody battle. So what I'm saying is that this novel actually came out of just kind of the two most traumatic periods of my life.
So this was self-therapeutic for you. Forget
I mean,
therapy. You wrote this book.
in a sense, I mean, yeah, I guess so that there are, of course, fictional happenings, but then some of the emotions and the more deeper thoughts and the reflections, those are real. I mean, that there are even, particularly in the first half, parts that are pretty much just straight autobiography, but people can, guess which parts were real, which parts were fiction. Chapter 22 was not real. If anyone would like to know,
Everyone who buys it now, they're
actually
gonna go straight to chapter 22 to see what we're talking about.
I mean,
That is one of the wildest chapters I've ever read in a book.
Yeah, they might, but actually, I think the beauty, everyone probably who has read it would argue with my choice of words, but the beauty of chapter 22 is
Beauty.
in the journey to get there, and the fact that it just turns up like that. And the thing that I was doing there is I feel that in a lot of my stories thus far, I have hinted at extreme violence, but I've never quite delivered. It's like I'm playing chicken. I'm implying that something messed up has happened. And kind of in the way that Craig Clevenger does, or in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if you imply enough, then you can almost trick the reader into thinking they actually experienced that violence. But I thought, discerning, intelligent readers, discerning, intelligent people, such as those who listen and watch Paper Cuts live, they might realize, hang on a minute, he hasn't actually shown anything graphic. So I dusted off some Ralph James White and some Edward Lee for a little bit of inspiration, and chapter 22 was born.
There you go.
I want to ask about we'll step off chapter 22, but like the personal stuff for you, was that hard for you to write that stuff and include it, even though it's, you're writing a fictional tale, but it's a lot of it was personal for you, at least your feelings wise. Was that hard for you to incorporate that stuff? Hard to write those scenes?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think.
Brad, if you make him cry on this, I'm done.
No, I'm not gonna cry. I did cry on the Ark Party podcast because I went really deep on that. I think that I used to be afraid of autobiography when I was much younger because I kind of didn't want my parents to see the kind of things that I was writing about, but something shifted, perhaps just becoming an adult, and I thought, I don't even care anymore. I think too, when I was at university, for some reason, I got it into my mind that if I were to write about real experiences, that was cheating in a way. I don't know where this idea came from, but it's like, no, you got to use your imagination. If you're
it's like
writing
you're plagiarizing your own experiences, kind of.
Yeah. But then, obviously, as I had a better understanding of fiction and writing, it's like, no, the best stuff usually comes from real life experiences. And I think as well that I write things in a fictional enough way that, like, I'm kind of not afraid to include autobiography because it's cased in other kind of literary devices. But there are some things, particularly like really tapping into that mental state, that were exhausting, that were difficult. Now, I think actually writing about the emotions attached to the divorce and the custody battle were harder than the childhood trauma because I'm more distanced from that. So I would say it is harder to write something when it is harder in terms of emotionally more taxing when you're in the moment. But I actually think you get even more authentic and better writing. So, I mean, with Daddy's Boy that I mentioned before, I am tapping a little bit into the emotions of the custody battle. And there were some parts of that where I was actually crying while writing, which is not necessarily something that I recommend, but
I kind of think, and I could be totally wrong, but I kind of think it would be harder for writers to not be a little autobiographic when they're writing, because I think maybe subconsciously they're automatically putting in some of their own experiences or their thoughts, or you know what I mean, into it without really realizing, oh, that's just my opinion or whatever. It is combining with the imagination of the story. So to be able to not do that, totally be 100% not autobiographical, in a story. I don't know if that, and I might get 20 emails from writers. Oh, I can make everything up myself, but there's probably something in every story from a writer. If it's just one sentence, one word, or something. You know what I mean? I think it'd be just
some kernel
harder.
Of truth from something.
Yeah. So because otherwise, let's face it, a fictional book, a story, is almost like a lie because that story didn't happen, right? But there's always truth behind a lie. Oh, that was a Friday night bomb. How awesome was
Jay's-
that?
Jay's done for the night.
Thank you. I'm out.
I
Yeah,
think
I
that
got philosophical for a second.
all storytelling by its nature is autobiographical in some sense.
Yeah.
Even if you're writing something that seems to be completely fictitious, like even if you're fictionalizing biography of another person, the
Mhm.
choices that you're making, the mode in which you're telling, it does make it autobiography. Now, obviously, there's more obvious autobiography,
Yeah.
and there's, I guess, more kind of couched autobiography. But I think that there are elements by the nature of writing that everything does have some aspect of autobiography. Just the
Mhm.
choices that you're making, the bits that you're deciding to tell, the bits that you're deciding to leave out. It is all autobiographical.
Yeah. I got you. We're all getting deep. Your turn to get deep, Brad. Come on.
So let's go to chapter 22 then, if we're going to talk about getting deep.
Oh, they get deep.
I do want to mention one thing. Like I was looking at your website earlier, and you have like a laundry list of who's who in the writing world that gave you, props for this new book here, little blurbs. But one stood out, and I haven't seen this guy's name for a while, and I'm glad. I would ask if you know him because this is pretty cool. His book Hater is kind of the one that got me back into reading that I didn't read for a long time. As David Moody, and when I got back into reading horror, and I mean, several years ago, I'd ask people, "Hey, have you read this one?" And they're like, "Who? David Moody? Do you know him personally or?"
Yeah, David Mood is a
That's
good
pretty. That's
friend.
pretty. Yeah, that
Yeah.
Hater series. That's what kind of got me back into diving down, reading the dark fiction and horror genre again. That's pretty cool.
Well,
I that was just me saying that was cool to see that you got him to give you a little blurb. So
yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about David Moody then. And firstly, as you said, you're a fan of Hater. Keep an eye out on David Moody because there could be some really good news, some really big news coming soon.
oh yeah,
Oh, Jay.
He
Yeah,
you gotta be
so I think a lot more people are going to have heard of David Moody in the next year. Let's put it like that.
let's do it.
Okay, I mean, I say let's put it like that. I just did put it like that.
Yeah, you just did.
Yeah, but in terms of David Moody, he's a good friend. He's one of the people who I've known the longest within the horror fiction genre. So I mean, before This Is Horror, I was writing various kind of horror reviews for different magazines
Right.
and doing various interviews. And so this was over 10 years ago. And rather than do it on the phone or online, which I could have done, I thought it would be just a much richer experience and I'd get a deeper interview if I went and I met up with each person who I was interviewing. So I took a little voice recorder because all of these were for print publication. So I got my voice recorder. I'm having to transcribe all of these, an absolute nightmare, to be honest. And you're also looking for like the gold, but yeah, David was one of the first people that I met. I think at the time he'd got a few of his autumn books out, and I'm trying to remember if he had two or I think he only had two of the Hater books at that time. So that's how
What
kind
was
of
what was the second one? Was the second one dog blood?
dog's blood, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he'd got Hater and Dog's Blood, but he hadn't got Them or Us at the time.
Yeah.
And anyway, we became really good friends. And so that David is kind of a big part of the This Is Horror story. When we decided to branch out and publish fiction, the first chapbook that we put out was Joe and Me by David Moody. when we celebrated the first 100 episodes of This Is Horror, we got David Moody on for the first live podcast. It's kind of like any big thing is happening, you got to call David
backstage
Moody.
right now, we have for you, David. I'm kidding. We don't have him backstage.
It's too late in the UK. He's a good friend, but he's not staying up till nearly 1 a.m. just to turn up.
What time is it there in Japan for you right now?
It is 8:46 in the morning.
So you're having breakfast with us right now. We're having late night Friday night drinks. You're having Saturday morning breakfast.
Basically, yeah.
How did the Japan thing? How did you get to Japan? By which way? How did you end up? I got personal just now. Why and how are you living in Japan?
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
I don't. When you said how, it's like, shall I be a dickhead and be like,
I
jumped on a plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know, when I graduated university, after that, I did a few kind of office admin jobs, and then I decided, I wanted to get into writing and publishing. I then got a job with Rebellion Publishing, who owned 2000 AD, so all the Judge Dredd graphic novels, and Solaris and Abaddon books. So they've done a number of good things within genre. And so, I was on my way to having the career that I wanted to have. And also with This Is Horror and my own writing, because that's always been my passion, writing and reading. But that there was a curiosity about exploring other countries and getting a richer cultural experience. And I knew a number of people who they had gone to various countries to teach English as a second language, and that seemed like quite a viable route to be able to live somewhere else. And so even though I was on the publishing and editorial path that I'd always wanted to be on, I did want to explore other countries too. And I thought, well, if ever there was a time to hand in my notice at a job that I really like, and my favorite job I've ever had, it would be to move to Japan. And so the reason that Japan came up is, I'm thinking about all these different countries. It's like pretty much any country is on the table. And I wanted it to be distinct from the experience I was having in the UK. So I thought, well, since I'm in the West, let's go to the East. And then I guess like I narrowed it down to South Korea and Japan. And just for me, Japan was where there was a little bit more intrigue. Also at the time I was with my ex-wife. She wasn't my ex-wife at the time. That would be weird. She was, in fact, my wife. Call up your ex-wife. Do you want to come and live with me in Japan? No, we fucking split up. What are you doing? Stop calling this number. But no, she had always had a real interest in Japan too. And I think initially we were looking at South Korea because it seemed to be a little bit easier to get accepted in South Korea. But I was like, well, hang on. If Japan is more the dream for you, why aren't we aiming for that? So then we decided to apply for jobs in Japan. We got a job in Japan, and that's how I initially ended up in Japan back in 2014. But, initially it was just to have that experience of another country, but then I soon fell in love with the culture, with the way that things are in Japan. There were things that initially I took to be a bit of a novelty. For example, the lower crime and the safety. I thought, this is quite good. Like I can I can take
How's that?
I mean, I can take a late night. Yeah, pretty good, pretty good.
How's that feel?
I can take like a late night subway back from like a major city, and I don't have to be on my guard and
Right,
looking
right.
around. And like if I so wanted to, I could just be walking down the town at 3 a.m. like showing like my iPhone or my imaginary Rolex, and like nobody's going to bother me. Whereas in the UK, it's like if you're walking through certain areas late at night, you probably don't even want to have like headphones in. You want to have your faculties about yourself. And
Well, probably
that,
not just the UK. I'm probably most other countries.
yeah,
Definitely in
yeah,
the US. Over
yeah,
here, yeah, you don't want to be, yeah, you don't want to be
yeah.
caught out
So
by yourself.
at first that seemed like a novelty, but then I don't. Well, why don't I deserve to be safe and not have shit and not have to have my guard up all the time? Because there'd always be like people trying to start fights and things for. I mean, particularly like growing up, like I've always been into heavy metal and like kind of
Yeah.
dressed in a goth, yeah, fuck yeah, dressed in a goth way, and like people would just start shit with me because I looked the part,
Mhm.
obviously like as time has gone on and genetics decided having long hair was not the way for me. Like there's a little bit
Favorite heavy
less.
metal band.
What was that?
Favorite heavy metal band.
Favorite heavy metal band? I mean, it's a difficult one. Like from thrash metal, Slayer is an easy choice, and
Okay.
I love the melodic death metal band Nevermore. There's At the Gates. There's Carcass. Church of Misery are pretty interesting. Like there's so many fucking good metal bands. It's an impossible
Right.
question.
Have you heard the new Judas Priest song?
I haven't. No.
Oh
But
yeah. After we're done, taking up your time, hop on YouTube and look at the new
yeah,
Judas Priest song. It's pretty freaking awesome. It's called
yeah,
Panic
no,
Attack.
yeah. I saw that they have a new song, but like a new Judas Priest song is a special moment. So I wanted, like, I didn't want to, for example, listen to it while I'm on a commute. I want to sit down
Right,
and
right.
absorb that song,
Oh, hey,
particularly,
Brad, you're still here. I'm sorry.
for the first time.
Brad's
But
like, Judas who? What?
yeah, I've seen Judas Priest live a few times. It was amazing when I saw them with Megadeth and Testament, because what supports to have too. That's
Right.
just like three amazing bands. But
Yeah.
people will notice in my fiction that it is peppered with heavy metal references. I think actually less so House of Bad Memories, although yeah, he plays a pale horse named Death at some point when
Right.
he gets in the car, made up of previous typo negative members. But yeah, like in the girl in the video and they're watching, there are so many metal references. Sometimes like reviews would get angry at it, and like they think that like I'm being pretentious. It's like, no, I just a
like
man
it.
who enjoys metal.
Just enjoy
I'm
talking
not.
about what I like to talk about, right?
Yeah. Like I think sometimes people feel different references are trying to be more clever than they actually
Yeah.
are. It's like that's not what's going on here.
There was a
We
few
wanna-
references that made me smile. It was like Goz was playing N64 and GoldenEye, and
Yeah.
what was his name? Caden, the little boy, was playing like
Yeah.
wrestling action, like Undertaker and stuff.
Oh
And we were
yeah.
talking about the rapper Nas for a little bit. So I was like, oh yeah, I like all this stuff.
Yeah.
GoldenEye
yeah.
is like the top N64 game, right?
Man, GoldenEye was the shit
Yeah.
back in the day, man. I played that for like days and days and days.
Yeah. And everyone wanted to be Odd Job, which is why Odd Job gets
Yeah.
a little shout out in the book.
he's
too.
so short, yeah. Because you
Yeah.
play a one-hit kill, go around and you just karate chop everybody.
Yeah.
We
So
want
is that
to.
stuff you grew up being, interested in wrestling and N64 and all that stuff? Is that stuff you grew up watching and
Yeah.
playing?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been watching wrestling since I was 4 years old. Like my dad was like, "Yeah, you might like this episode of WCW." And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think he did it just to kind of shut me up, but it kind of had the opposite effect, because then I got hooked, and then I'm trying to do wrestling moves on everyone. Like I wanted to,
Mhm.
yeah, I even wanted to fight my
I still
dad.
do,
It's
but
like,
my
let's
kids
have a
don't get
wrestling
it.
match.
So
Me
I
and
still
my
try
brother
the
used to do it
wrestling
all the
moves.
time.
Yeah.
But
My wife gets mad when I try to wrestle moves on the kids.
yeah,
So
I thought you were gonna say on her, like, you know.
well, she does
You
one
Stone
on
Cold
me.
stun your Stone Cold stun your wife.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I guess we were teenagers probably. I did the ankle slam on my brother on his bed, just completely collapsed. It just broke his bed to
The-
pieces.
The craziest thing that I did was probably, we were in a holiday home, i.e., not a home that my parents owned, and the setup was like, because there's me and 3 siblings, so there was like a double bed and then a bunk bed kind of to the right of it, and you might see where we're going with this.
Yeah,
And
Oh,
I'm
the
like, oh,
turnbuckle.
yeah, this will be pretty hardcore if I basically, me and my brother, we climb up the bunk bed, and then I kind of sitting power bomb him off onto the
Nice.
double bed,
right.
but there's so much impact that we break it in half.
Yeah,
Oh
we
my
broke plenty
God.
of beds doing that. Not at my house, because I wasn't
Yeah.
allowed at my house. I was always at a friend's house, and they'd have like the nice beds
Yeah.
with the headboards with the
Yeah.
shelf. So that'd be like a top rope. Whenever
Yeah.
there were 2 beds, we put them together, and that was like a double ring over the top battle royal thing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
now we're just reminiscing.
Man, for real, the 90s WWF was the best. I love wrestling so much back then. It was so good. Stone Cold
Yeah.
was my favorite.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mine too. Yeah.
Chad, bunk beds make so much room for activities.
Yeah.
The Step Brothers movie, that movie's so funny.
Is that a work safe comment, Chad? I don't know. Are we still talking about wrestling, or is this a different type of wrestling? What's going on here?
Do we want
Since we're
to?
lighting, you'll do a game real quick.
You want to do the
since
game or
the
reading?
mood's
You want to do the
kinda
game? Get the game moving here.
Do a game.
Yeah, yeah.
So
This
Michael
is,
told
this
me
is a
he's-
hard hitting question type game.
Michael
Red.
said absolutely no trivia, or I'm canceling the episode. I'm walking off.
He must have
So we're
saw.
gonna do-
He must have seen some trivia we done in the past. That's what
Yeah,
it
some of
was.
the other ones have been a little rough recently. So this one's gonna be more lighthearted in a way. So we'll play a little bit of Would You Rather. Would you rather? Jay hates those videos so much.
You and Chris.
Oh, Jay hates them so bad. All right, so since you're a horror author and you have a horror podcast, we'll start out a little morbid with our first Would You Rather.
Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna start out morbid. So, would you rather die by freezing to death or drowning?
I think I would rather die by freezing to death. I mean, I'd rather not die. Let's have
Yeah.
that on the record. But of the 2 options, I think we'll go for freezing to death.
Okay. What about you, Jay? What would you rather do?
Freezing that you probably just like eventually go to sleep, right? Like doze off.
Mm.
I think so. I think drowning's kind of the same way. I think you just kind of
I
Peaceful
figured
at the
like
end.
drowning, you'll still struggle, like gasping for air. So I think
Yeah.
I think it was like freezing to death, not know it. You just doze off and just go peacefully in
Be
your
done.
sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel that, like, if I'm drowning, I know that I'm going to die.
Right.
But
Right.
if I'm freezing, I'm so optimistic. And these last few years, like, they've been a real test for that. So I might still have some kind of mental strength and believe that it's not going to happen. And then oh well, it happened anyway. But I'm dead at that point, so
Yeah.
it's over.
Man, Brad, you're just full of cheer and happiness tonight.
Hey, we're all talking about horror books. So you must start out with
Whatever.
something
Come
like
on.
that.
Horror can be
All right,
fun
this
and
one-
happy
this
too.
This one's not as dark. Okay.
Okay.
So would you rather have the ability to teleport anywhere you want, or touch a book and absorb the book in its entirety?
Well, I mean, both would be really helpful given my current predicament. Because if I can teleport anywhere, given that I'm in Japan and so many of my friends are in the UK or the US, that would just be amazing. It would also save me a lot of money in terms of airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
So, or airplane flights. I don't buy an airplane every time
buy
I need
jets
to
every
go
time.
somewhere. Let's just clarify that. You know, there's so many conventions in the US that I'd love to go to that are logistically complicated, but with that ability, yeah, I'm gonna go for teleporting because I think too, even though you know that the book, the absorbing all the information of the book would be useful, particularly with this as horror podcast, and like the turnaround time from booking someone and then having them on the show could be amazing. It's like I just get the book, touch it. It's like, well,
I'm done.
we can,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think that part of the joy of reading is the experience and the journey. And I
Mhm.
don't feel that if I just absorb all the information, I could get the authentic experience of reading. It wouldn't quite be the same. Even though I'd know everything about it, I feel I'd know it on an intellectual rather than an emotional level. And it's kind
That's
of
true.
like
Yeah.
this challenge that people are having at the moment and this fear of AI and AI coming along and writing books. I don't feel threatened by AI in terms of my own fiction because I think what we do, what we have, is we have the emotional content. We have what makes us us. And that is why AI will never actually replace interesting art and fiction because it lacks being human, it lacks the soul.
Yeah.
And yeah, it could be a threat to kind of formulaic by the numbers money making fiction.
James
But
Patterson, excuse me.
but I think if you're not looking, if that is not the only thing that you're doing, of course we all want to make some money, but if that's not your primary intent or your only intent, it's not going to replace fiction and art that is emotional and has that human experience. And actually, I think some of the most interesting fiction is deliberately flawed. Like there are deliberate mistakes in it. This is something that Chuck Palahniuk does a lot. And he's done it in his latest book, Not Forever, But For Now. He has purposely had the narrator of a wildlife documentary be Richard Attenborough, not David Attenborough. There's these little things where you're like, wait, what's going on here? Now, the reason that he's done that is because Richard Attenborough is dead and David is not, so he can't be sued by a dead. But he's also done things where he talks about the great Irish tomato famine. And there are these little things that they make you as a reader feel clever for cottoning on. And I don't think you would really see that in kind of AI created fiction. You
It's
would
not
also,
clever enough to do something like that.
yeah, you would also not have these autobiographical elements that I've put in and kind of like flaws from trauma. You could have a fabricated version, but it wouldn't quite ring true.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are thinking, bloody hell, I thought this was a game show. What kind of tangent is that? This was a quick would you rather, and now you're talking about not 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 really the ethics of AI, but just like the threat of AI.
What was the
There-
question? No, I'm kidding.
Jim,
we
what would
can
you rather do?
circle back to that or not, as the case may be. But yeah, there is a wide discussion on AI and on art.
I
But
can see everyone being scared of AI like flooding Amazon and everything, where your books kind of get lost
yeah,
in the horde. But I think after a while, it's gonna pan out, and those aren't going to be like no one's going to be wanting those anymore because you're going to be able to tell, like, oh, this just it's paint by the numbers. Essentially, it's garbage, and I think people are going to be able to tell that once the cycle sort of goes through its phase. I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to create something meaningful from AI and authentic, you'd have to feed that computer or that program so much information that you might as well just write the book.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are threats, there are concerns to different kind of industries and different kind of faculties of writing, I suppose. But on a purely like artistic level, and whether I think that ultimately it would create books to a point where there would be no need for traditional storytelling or writers, I don't feel that at all.
We got approached someone wanting to give us notes on our program,
show notes, yeah, AI generated
by
show
using
notes.
an AI program to give us notes. And it's like, oh, you don't need to watch a 2-hour program like we put on, because they just condensed it into, here's an example, they just condensed it into like a
3
paragraph.
paragraphs or something. Yeah.
Here's what happened on this episode of Paper Cuts. Instead of watching it for 2 hours, it's like, oh, you can just read this. This is what he talked about. Great. Kind of weird. Freaky.
I think that kind of function, kind of like summaries, and then a summary that would be edited, that is a more kind of appropriate use.
Right. If it's being used for like
AI.
educational purpose or something, I could see that, but it was just,
it was really weird. It's like Jay's tone was jovial. I was like, how does it know that?
Yeah.
That's so strange.
It's like that's might say you try to do it for like a movie, or let AI write the review for the movie or a TV show or something. It's just kind of weird the way you don't get the same like feeling from that movie or emotions from that movie, like you said earlier with reading the book, absorbing it and everything. So
Yeah.
Sorry, Chad's comment. Gotta let the ferrets out. Not an Indian.
Oh.
No.
Chad, it gets to a certain time of night where we always have to let the ferrets out. I hear you. Oh, I hear you.
All right, we'll do a few more would you rathers.
Yeah, yeah. Let's moving away from AI and ferrets and AI ferrets, in fact.
So, would you rather be able to converse with any animal or be fluent in all human languages?
Be fluent in all human languages.
Okay. You don't want to talk to the ferrets?
It's an easy answer for me. Even though, I mean, ironically, if I could talk to all the animals, I'd probably become more famous and richer, because, like, it's the real life Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, Dr. Doolittle's.
But like, living in Japan, and with there being so many countries I want to travel to, it just seems like a more useful skill to have, really, for my everyday life at the moment. And it'd be kind of annoying because like my Japanese is so, but imagine if living here I could talk to all of the stray cats by the riverbed, but I couldn't have like a philosophical discussion with all of my colleagues. It's like, it'd be amazing to be able to converse in all human languages. And unfortunately, I don't think you're saying you can give me that gift, but if you could, and I come into work on Monday and it's like, well, where the fuck did this come from?
That'd be the power you download from the book, just all the other languages.
Yeah.
This one's gonna freak Jay out. So this is
by the way, I would totally just do the animal thing. Just
you'd be talking like dogs and stuff.
I'm an animal person, so I would totally just like, I'd rather like, what the heck are you thinking? So
anyway, when they're barking, what are they yelling?
That's what I want to know. Like, what are you actually saying? What are you thinking? So how do you feel? How do you feel when everyone watches you poop? Right.
That's why
All right.
they're yelling at you. They're barking. They don't like it.
What's your next one, Brad? Go.
It could just like create more problems, though, couldn't it? Because if you can understand all animals, it's like you're gonna realize, like, oh shit, this is like the kind of Harvey Weinstein equivalent of a dog, and then what kind of moral implications of that? And yeah,
You go outside and see
probably
the
like
birds twittering and they're just yelling at each other.
yeah, and it could become distracting. You know, I like getting out in nature and walking. I like hiking, but you know, at the moment, if you've got bird song, it can feel quite peaceful.
They're
But
doing rap
if
battles or
actually, you know,
something.
they're having a bit of a Barney, it's like, oh, you fucking wanker, you took the egg from my nest again. No, that was my nest, you little prick. Oh, for goodness sake, this is out of hand.
That'd be pretty funny though.
It'd be funny, but it wouldn't be a peaceful nature walk anymore.
That's true. That's true. All right. So for this one, there's a preferences. You're locked in a room full of spiders. So
Mhm.
would you rather have the lights on or would you rather have the lights off?
Lights
I hate
on.
you.
Lights
People-
on.
Lights on. What about you, Jay? Just like Matt, just the floor's covered in spiders, Jay. You want the lights on or off?
Can we go back to dying?
the dying question.
Yeah.
So you'd rather have the lights on, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, then I can at least keep track of the spiders, maybe avoid them. Like, oh, maybe this is the time though where it would have been good for me to have
To
chosen
speak animals.
to speak animal. It's like, okay, back up, guys. What are you doing here?
Well,
What's
your
if,
the
friend,
if
I'm
the
your
lights
friend.
aren't, you can see which ones you squished and killed, and how many more
Yeah,
you
but
got to
then
go.
but then you see them all though, Jay. Just the flood of them.
Yeah, I mean, neither is a ideal situation, is it really? But I think, you know, it kind of comes back to the idea of, in horror, is it better to show or not to show the monster? And the reason that sometimes there can be so much dread if you don't show the monster is that, like, you can't really easily battle or understand the unknown, but once you see the monster, it's kind of a knowable quantity.
Mhm.
So, you know, at least let's know what we're dealing with here, because the imagination is powerful. It's like I might imagine even more spiders
Oh yeah.
if the lights are off. So we're having the lights on. Also, like, I don't know, with some of them poisonous, it seems highly irresponsible if they're
We
poisonous
gotta get off
for
this.
me to not.
Jay's gonna be like switching around.
This is Jay's trigger topic. Okay,
It
well,
is.
Spiders is not too
Then-
bad to me.
then
At
snakes.
least you didn't say snakes, dude.
Room full of snakes.
snake is the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jay, no, I'm just playing. So would you rather climb to the peak of the tallest mountain or go to the deepest pit in the ocean? I guess deepest trench in the ocean.
I mean, why am I going to the deepest trench in the ocean? What's the purpose here? I mean, I
Gold.
climb mountains. I enjoy doing that. It's one of my hobbies. So it feels like, yeah, climbing to the top of the highest mountain would be like I've never felt like let's go to the bottom of the ocean. Also, that it feels fraught with more danger. Like, you know, am I gonna be able to get out again?
They both seem incredibly dangerous. But yeah, I guess
Yeah.
more
Why
people
am I
probably
being
climb
put in
to-
this fucking situation where I have to do one of these things?
I think more people probably climbed Mount Everest than have gone to the Marianas Trench, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're going with a mountain.
Going to the mountain. What about you, Day? You want to go to the ocean or the top of the world?
Neither, because it's too much effort for either one.
Too much effort.
Yeah.
We'll do one more. Would you rather never be able to go out during the day or never be able to go out during the night?
I would rather never be able to go out during the night.
So you're not a vampire. That's good.
Because
It was a test.
yeah. As somebody who is pretty health conscious, I'm aware of the importance of getting a lot of sunlight and vitamin D. And I like when I don't go out for a walk in the day, like my mental health suffers. I feel worse. So I just think that would not be a good idea for my mental state to not be allowed out in daylight. You know, I'm quite interested in like Sweden and Scandinavia, but I feel that the lack of daylight hours in the winter
Mm-hmm.
would probably make it not a good fit for me to kind of live there. Or if like I did live there, then I'd probably have to like spend the winter in Portugal or something, take a little flight over. So yeah, like I told you before, I said you can ask me any question, no matter how nonsensical, and I will answer it with utmost seriousness. And so yeah, that is the one that I would choose. I did wonder if these questions would be more extreme and not suitable for work. I thought you might ask me
Well, we could have
something
gone that
really
way.
messed up.
Try to make it family friendly a little bit.
Family friendly, yeah, like my book and that
Yeah.
particular chapter we've referenced a lot.
So, well, let's talk about chapter 22. I don't want to spoil it and give away what happens. But
Okay.
where
Is that what you're
where-
going to read for us? You're going to read chapter 22 for us tonight?
No.
Rob Olson from the Ark Party did joke about that. He did say that I should read from it, but like I said before, I think
It's better to go in not
yeah,
knowing
like
what's coming.
the impact, like it wouldn't be the same if I
Mhm.
just read it. Like you have to have gone on the journey. You have to have read 50,000 words and then be hit with that out of nowhere.
But with that, like I said, I don't want to give it away and say what happens, but where did that horrible idea come from? Why did you throw that in there? That was terrible.
I mean, like I said before, I felt that I had been playing chicken in my fiction, in that I'd hinted that I would do something or write about something extreme, but I'd never quite gone into that detail.
Mhm.
And I thought, right, this is the third standalone book. I got to deliver. We got to stop
You gotta
playing
deliver.
chicken. And so I knew that there was going to be some sort of torture method. I think we can say that. I mean,
Yep.
again, I did say it. You can't add "we can say that" after you've said something. I need to edit that out of my way of talking. And I wanted to make sure that it was something original, that it was something that hadn't been read or seen before. And
Mhm.
so I started looking into various kind of torture methods. And when I landed upon that one, I thought, yeah, that is the one. That is the one for me.
So that
And
what you called it in the book, is that really what it's called? I
yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
give it away so someone
yeah,
Googles it or
yeah,
whatever. So
yeah.
that's what it's
Like
called.
pretty much everything I've said about it is factually accurate. Yeah.
That's horrible.
Which maybe adds another level. And you know that there's something in Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door where, like, obviously there's a lot of torture, and then there's one chapter which is essentially a line, and he says something like, "I can't write about what happened next." And
Mhm.
so I started off chapter 22 by saying that, but then it was like the old fake out, and it's like, oh, and I can't say this and I can't say that. So it's like I did a mashup of Jack Ketchum saying he can't say something, and then just like, you know, Edward Lee of absolutely saying it. So you kind of got the best, or some would argue the worst, of both worlds there. And I will say that with the torture method and with that chapter, everybody apart from Bob Pastorella said to me, you know, that is messed up. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I've just read that. And
It was vile. It was vile, Michael. It was vile.
Well, Bob said to me, I think you can go further. So what I'm saying is, you know, however vile it is now, that is thanks to Bob Pastorella. Like, I added just a little bit more. I mean, people were saying it was messed up beforehand, but I got even more indulgent when Bob said, I think you can go further. It's like, look, don't play a game of one-upmanship with me, because
Well,
I will go
you got
further.
to start one up yourself now. So there's going to be a chapter like that in your next book.
Chapter 23.
Yeah.
You got up a
Yeah,
chapter each time.
So you got to keep one up in yourself.
Yeah, the thing is that, like, I mean, in the next book there were some messed up moments, but it's not quite gone that far. And as I said, like, this one is a dark thriller with comedic moments. The next
Mhm.
one is a dark comedy. I don't know if I could put like a kind of chapter 22 style thing in and for it to still just be marketed as a dark comedy, even if everything else is like dick jokes. At the moment you put chapter 22 in, you can't just call it a comedy.
I could see the chapter 22 starting out as a comedy being like something crazy that happens like the Hangover movies or something. But it's just
Yeah.
the flip side of it.
Yeah.
But you're talking about
Yeah.
Bob wanted you to push it further. I think you did a great line or a great job of like walking the line. Like it wasn't not enough, but also you could have gone a lot further with like the descriptions and just how vile and nasty it was. You did like a perfect balance of not too little and not too
But
much.
you start teetering on extreme at some point. You know.
It's extreme, but it's not like
Right,
it's not
but
graphically extreme.
But you don't want
if
the
that
whole
makes
book
sense.
to be marketed as something extreme, though. Do you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it doesn't feel out of place with the rest of it. It's not like, oh my gosh, this chapter 22 is like the most extreme thing ever and doesn't fit with the rest of it. It's like building up to that, so it fits in with how everything else is led up to that point, but it doesn't go overboard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, I wanted to get some sort of reaction like Chuck Palahniuk has in Guts as well, just going into that real
with the drain scene.
minutia. Yeah, and detail. But it's interesting you've mentioned extreme horror, because it seems that all of my fiction is quite hard to classify and to put in a specific subgenre. I guess it doesn't help that from book to book I will change genre midway through, but I have noticed, because of that scene, like, it is getting mentions in terms of extreme horror. It's tapping into that a little bit.
Okay.
I think the humor is also tapping into Bizarro for some people. So
Okay.
It could be on
it's
Bizarro.
still,
I saw some Bizarro in it. Yeah.
yeah. So it's still difficult to classify, but I suppose I'm throwing flavors from other subgenres into the mix. And I mean, that's why it's easier for me to call what I'm doing dark fiction. It's certainly not like some people are reluctant to use the horror label. I mean, what's my podcast called? This is horror. So, but I don't think what I do is straight horror. I mean, I
Mhm.
think, if I think about straight horror, that's more Ramsey Campbell and Adam Neville. Whereas, it's a dark thriller, I think, is most accurate. There are elements of crime, there are elements of horror. They're Watching with Bob Pastorella is probably, the nearest to a horror novel that I've done. I mean, you could call it a suspense novel, but then some people would argue that saying suspense is just a way of admitting it's horror without using the term horror.
It's
And
a marketing scheme, because sometimes people are afraid of the word horror sometimes, but you put in mystery or suspense or thriller, they're all over that.
Yeah. And then the girl in the video, I mean, it's probably whatever genre Black Mirror and the Twilight Zone are.
Yeah.
Like, it could be horror, but it's kind of tech horror, I guess.
Psychological.
Yeah.
Sci-fi-ish and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And horror is such an ambiguous term because it covers such a broad spectrum of stuff. Like I feel like horror is the broadest genre there is, because there's so much that can fall under that basic horror term umbrella.
Yeah.
There's so much that can fit under there.
Yeah.
Should we read some horror? Did you want to do a reading?
I can do
Did
I
did
can
you
do
rest
a
your throat
reading.
enough?
What was that? Sorry.
Did you rest your throat enough all day? Or I mean,
Well,
your day's early still, so
Yeah, he
well,
just started.
we will find out. You see, last week I did a number of This Is Horror podcasts. I know that Brad turned up to the live podcast. Didn't see
Yeah.
you, Jay. Just saying. Just
You're
saying.
slacking, Jay.
But that day I woke up with the first sore throat I'd had all year. So it was
Oh,
a
yeah.
terrible time to wake up with a sore throat when I had like 16 hours of podcasts planned over 2 days. But
That's wild.
yeah, this week it has been recovering. I'm not at 100% yet, which is why I have to periodically mute the microphone and drink some water. But we'll give a reading a go. Let's see what happens. If like my throat goes and I pass out or die, then it will just add to the horror. It'll probably
say,
boost the
makes good
sales.
TV.
Yeah. So yeah, for the reading, I'm gonna read a standalone story because
Okay.
I just feel that I want to give people something more complete rather than just an extract from House of Bad Memories. I also feel that if I were to do a reading from House of Bad Memories, the bits that lend themselves best are kind of midway through, which
Spoilery bits,
then
yeah.
jumps into spoiler territory. So I am reading a Christmas story. It's like, what? You're not reading the book and you're reading yeah, I'm breaking all the fucking
Not even
rules.
Halloween yet.
It's all right.
Yeah.
There's Christmas stuff out of Walmart for
I know.
like 2 months now, so you're
I'm
good.
I'm waiting for my
Yeah.
Christmas tree cakes to come out. So.
Yeah, I am reading this because it is dialogue heavy and I enjoy this story. God damn it. It makes me laugh. Hopefully
Take it
will
away.
make some
Ho,
of you
ho,
laugh
ho.
too. Yeah, so this is called Last Christmas. I was carving up the turkey and listening to Christmas songs when Lily said it. Her parents were still in traffic, but she'd insisted I carve anyway, saying, "Look at the size of the thing. By the time it's ready, they'll be here. And if not, they'll deserve cold turkey." Lily could benefit from cold turkey. She'd returned home around 2 a.m., smelling like she'd swum in a beer barrel and yabbering about shit I'd done wrong. Happy fucking Christmas. When we awoke, she was all cheer and bounce, probably still pissed. By 11, she was back on the wine. Wham's Last Christmas started up. "Imagine if someone actually did," Lily said. "Did what?" "Gave you their heart." "They'd be dead. It's a metaphor, not literal." "If it was literal, it would be, last Christmas I gave you a Rolex, and last Christmas you gave me an STD because last Christmas you gave Maria from work anal at the Christmas party." I carved faster. Didn't tell Lily the literal version wasn't as catchy and had no rhythm. "That was the worst Christmas present I ever got," Lily said. "Neither the STD nor shagging Maria were meant as presents. The iPad, perfume, and trip to Hawaii were Lily's gifts. Originally, it was an iPad, perfume, and box of chocolates. I added the Hawaii trip after I'd found out about the watch and Lily had found out about Maria. "I'm sorry," I said, which was true, but never made things better. I tested other responses, but after replying, "I love you," Lily almost stabbed me with a Santoku knife. So now I stuck with sorry. "Sorry didn't get rid of the STD," Lily said. "Had to use a cream for that." George Michael said something about once bitten, twice shy. Bloody George. I can see you don't want to talk about it, Lily said, sounding somewhere between surprised and disappointed. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Not me, not Lily, certainly not Maria, who was once engaged to a wealthy investor and now worked Tesco's cooked meats counter. Anyway, Lily said, what do you reckon's the worst Christmas present you could get someone? I looked over to assess whether she meant you as in me or you as in one. She swilled wine and gave nothing away, challenging me, seeing how fucked up I could be. Cancer, I said. Not sure you can give someone cancer, at least not directly. AIDS? And we're back to Maria. Maria never had AIDS, just an STD. Though I imagine she didn't have that anymore. Jesus, I don't know. I stopped carving, grabbed a bottle of beer from the fridge. A really old vacuum? What? Lily started laughing. I'm trying to think. Fucking hell. She laughed harder. Why are you getting so stressed? You're actually sweating. I wiped my forehead. Looked like I'd soaked my hand in water. Why wasn't she sweating? The kitchen was hot enough, and given how much she'd drunk the previous night. I opened the window. Lily was still grinning. Then Martine McCutcheon started singing, and I considered picking up the carving knife and ending my life. A really old vacuum, Lily repeated. Because? Don't explain it, she wailed. Okay, I'm calm. Deep breath in, deep breath out. How about you? What's the worst Christmas present you could get someone? Now this I've thought about. Not the worst Christmas present I could get anyone. Just you. I came up with 3. The first and most mild, a keg full of pickle juice. Jesus, I'll stop you there. That is absolutely the worst. Can you imagine the smell? She giggled. You'd have to drink it too. Fuck off, would I? I reckon you'd take a daily dose of pickle juice over the other 2. You're a head case, Lily. She flashed a smile, teeth gleaming. Remember, this is a game, a bit of festive fun, because sometimes you overreact. Festive fun, understood. She squealed with delight. I started from the premise I would have to hurt you. You're going to punch me in the face for Christmas? Pretty shitty, but I'll take punches over pickles. Oh, darling, I haven't finished. She took a deep breath. Tell me, how could I hurt you? If punches are out, I suppose kicks are too. Didn't you do jiu-jitsu? Bet you've got a mean arm bump. You're thinking wrong. On the stereo, John Lennon wished us happy Christmas. The choir declared the war over. I wasn't so sure. What do you love most in the world? Lily asked. You? What? Not who. Sex? Not an activity. Resident Evil? You went from me to sex to Resident Evil. Interesting. I shrugged. Coco, she said. You love Coco the most. I'd had Coco since she was a pup. We'd grown up together. Wouldn't have made it through school without her. I'll give you that. But don't see what Coco's got to do with this. Speaking of which, where is she? About. Living room, I think. She checked her watch. The present would involve Coco, but isn't Coco. At least not all of that bitch. Steady on. What? She is a bitch. Anyway, I'd need Coco still for the... Operation sounds so professional. This is more DIY. Me operating. She laughed, turning solemn when I didn't join in. What's wrong with you? So I'd hang out with Coco, take her for walks, stroke her fur, feed her treats, all to gain her trust. But when her guard's down, I'd put something in her food or drink to sedate her. Not permanently, just long enough to do what needs to be done. Well, not quite long enough, but almost. Besides, it's more interesting if the bitch wakes up halfway. Halfway through what? You're extremely angry, darling. It's Christmas, for goodness sake. Here, wine. She thrust her glass towards me. I pushed it away. Halfway through what? I put plastic sheets down and wear coveralls. I've watched enough Dexter. Lily, please, through what? Suppose you'd call it decapitation. I'd cut the bitch's head off and I made to leave, but Lily flung herself at me. Darling, please look at me because this bit's important. Then I would seal her head in a box and give it to you. I pushed Lily away, dashed into the living room. No Coco. Where is she? Where the fuck is she, you bitch? I don't know, but there's no need to speak like that. I need to see Coco now. Then bloody look for her, but don't take it out on me. You said she was in the living room. I thought she was, but heavens, the house isn't big. We'll find her soon enough. Lily whistled. Coco, Coco, darling. Movement from upstairs. Soon Coco pitter-pattered downstairs and into the living room. I held her tight, fighting tears. Lily sat on the sofa. You owe me an apology. I told you this was festive fun. I knew you'd overreact. Oh, darling, are you actually sobbing? You're crazy. Lily looked at her watch. 1 o'clock. A van pulled up outside the house. A delivery man got out carrying a package. The doorbell rang. Get it then, Lily said. So I did, bringing the package into the kitchen where Lily stood with a fresh glass of wine. What's this? I asked. Your Christmas present. Open it. I removed the tape. Another game? She tapped her nose. Faster, darling. My parents will be here soon. This may not be to their taste. Inside stood a white and blue medical box. A warning label read, Caution, Biohazard. Frantic fingers prized open the box, revealing a sinewy heart on a bed of ice. It looks so real. What type of heart is this? Definitely not an ox's. Too small for a pig's. A lamb's, then? Don't be silly, darling. It's a human heart. Sure. I made to close the box. Lily rested a hand on my arm. I went to so much trouble. Least you could do is enjoy it. Lily turned down the stereo. Someone harping on about Christmas every day. Would have made more sense if I'd told you about the third gift, but you were too busy crying over Coco. Anyway, I was listening to that song. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart and thought, now there's an idea. I couldn't give you my own because, as you pointed out, I'd be dead. But what about someone else's? Soon I had the perfect answer. Darling, aren't you going to guess whose heart it is? Shaun the sheep. So silly, you know it's a human heart. It's not a bloody human heart, Lily. You're just stupid games. You always take things too far. Maybe I took things an incy-wincy bit far, but I was so excited. She paused. Darling, you're supposed to fill the silence to say things like, ooh, is it my mother's heart? And I say, no, but good guess. And you could say, oh, it could be Rachel's. And I say, she lives in Scotland, darling. I'm not trekking all the way for a Christmas present. Be realistic. And you're like, grandma's? And I go, geographically nearer, sure. But is it worth the effort? Give it a few years and you can ask the Undertaker if he'll bag it up like leftovers at a restaurant. Fuck's sake, Lily. This is why our relationship's ruined. I can't deal with this. Lily waved her arms like the fucking loon she is. Maria's! It's Maria's heart! Piss off! I'm serious. It makes perfect sense. Last year, you chose her over me. This year, you have her heart over mine. She clapped her hands together. I'm a genius. You're sick. She blocked the living room entrance. Go sit at the breakfast bar. With slumped shoulders, I agreed. You don't believe me, Lily said. Course I don't believe you. Listen, I'll carve the turkey. You call your parents and see where they are. Let's pretend this didn't happen. She looked disappointed. Later, we could cook the lamb's heart with rosemary and some onions. Enjoy it, like you said. But Rosemary's alive, Dr. Lecter. I didn't react. Dr. Lecter, she repeated. Hannibal Lecter? The cannibal? Rosemary's a herb, but also... She stopped herself. I get it, even though you haven't spoken with Maria in ages, there's a lot to process. I hope you don't regret anything. People say that when someone dies, they think about all the things they should have said. I don't regret anything because perhaps if you had regrets, none of this would have happened. A holiday to Hawaii and a box of fucking chocolates? Maria's not fucking dead. I can see her heart. How do you explain that? Not dead. You are exhausting. Why do you think I was out so late? Coco wasn't the bitch I befriended. Lily, you are the craziest. She was easy to find. Still a regular at the 7 Stars. I'd gone several times before to be sure. She'd always come in around 9. Yesterday was no exception. Don't know how she afforded it on her wage. She sat alone on Christmas Eve. Sad, really. Of course, in an alternative reality, she'd have been in some elite establishment that people like us wouldn't have a hope in hell of getting into. I took my smartphone from my pocket. Lily frowned. What are you doing? Ringing Maria. Darling, she's dead. Her phone's in the canal. If there's something you want to say, why not speak to her heart? I dialed straight to voicemail. Satisfied? Lily said. I felt my throat drying up. Fuck's sake, I'm going to have to call her home. Doesn't she live with her parents? You can't ring them on Christmas Day and tell them you've got a piece of their daughter. It won't go down well. Besides, they hate your guts, darling. Maria had it all mapped out. Was set to live the upper class dream. Did you see that diamond, or was that kind of ring of no interest? I scanned my phone. Still had Maria's home number. Darling, it's all a joke. Don't call them. She's probably doing a shift at Tesco on Christmas Day. Got to fund their drinking habits somehow. I'm phoning her. You'll ruin Christmas. Maria's mother answered quickly. Addington residence? Hello, is Maria there? Afraid not, though she should have arrived 1 hour ago. Oh, so when did you last see her? That's the thing. We haven't heard from her since yesterday evening. She was supposed to... sorry, may I ask who's calling? I hung up, grabbed the carving knife. Maria's not there. She's missing. Lily chuckled. You do love to exaggerate. I could hear. She said they hadn't heard from her. Very different from missing. Did you kill her? Oh, Jesus, you're fucking psycho, says the guy waving the knife. Lily skipped into the living room. La 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 la. Time for my present. She picked up a thin A4 gift wrapped envelope from under the tree. My present to her. Now's not the time. What about Maria? She's damaged the marriage enough. Lily took the knife from me, rested it on the mantelpiece. I tried to snatch the envelope, but she grasped tightly. Darling, don't be selfish. You've had your present. Now it's my turn. I could get you something else, please. I looked to the knife. Turkey meat flecked its perimeter. She tore open the envelope, pulled out the papers, looked at them, then me, tears in her eyes. I guess you win. This truly is the worst Christmas present. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Divorce papers? Is this a fucking joke? She eyed the knife. It was difficult to say who could get to it faster. I said, is this a fucking joke? I forced a laugh. It sounded more like joking. Yeah, just a joke. A bit of festive fun. And that is the reading.
Nice.
Where can we find
was
that
funny.
story? Is that
That-
someplace?
There is an audio version, a professionally narrated audio version.
I think you
Oh,
did
you
pretty
did-
good. Yeah.
You did really good, man.
At one
What
point,
I-
I thought I was Ringo at one moment. Just FYI.
yeah. There's an audio version on Hawk and Cleaver's The Other Stories podcast. So that came out a number of years ago around Christmas rather than being performed in October.
I was gonna call you every name in the book. When you got
Jay
the
was-
dog part, I was just getting ready
Yeah.
to like shut this
He
off.
was
I was gonna-
worried.
Yeah.
luckily, you made that twist. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. We did the fake out once again.
You didn't
Yeah.
kill the dog.
Yeah.
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 So I want to ask you real quick about your podcast. And since you've had so many writers on your show, has that influenced or informed, not influenced as far as like you're trying to copy their style or anything, but like informed or elevated your writing anyway, getting to talk to all these others authors about their craft and whatnot over the years?
I think initially when I started This Is Horror podcast, it made it harder for me to write and put things out publicly because I was talking to all these legends such as Ramsey Campbell, who we mentioned before, and Adam Neville, Dave Moody, Josh Malaman, and a lot of them are doing this kind of literary supernatural fiction. Whereas, like, you know, what I'm doing, you've read it, you know what I'm doing. And I felt like, is what I'm doing kind of lesser, or if not lesser, then because of the nature of who I'm interviewing, are people then going to expect me to put out this kind of clever Stephen Graham Jones style metafiction, and then they're going to get some like revenge Christmas anal story and feel that like this is not what we expected, and this is infantile and this is juvenile. So for a while I was a little bit worried and almost paralyzed, and I felt like, yeah, I'd almost fucked myself. It's like I've raised the bar too much, and people are going to expect a thing that I don't do. But then I guess as I spoke to more and more people, I just realized like horror and dark fiction is so wide, is so broad, that like the most important thing is being authentic and true to yourself. And so, you know, when I realized that, and then when I put out like my first few stories publicly and I got a reasonable reception, I realized like it doesn't matter. And I think now, like the more I write, the easier it gets, because already, you know, just 3 books in, I mean, multiple short stories, over 20 short stories, but 3 books in, people are starting to recognize almost like the signifiers from a Michael David Wilson story. It's going
Mhm.
to be dialogue heavy. There's going to be
It's going to
humor.
reference 80s pop Christmas songs. So it's going to be in my head all weekend now.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna
exactly.
I'm singing around the house. My wife's gonna be like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, but like I think in terms of like my writing now and how it influences it, I think like talking to guests who have a lot of energy and optimism, and people like Jonathan Jans and Josh Malaman are the two who spring to mind. It just infuses me with that optimism and that excitement too. So that's a kind of indirect way that it inspires and it affects my writing. I think all the ways that it affects me are kind of more indirect, but I'm talking to people every week. So I'm getting insights into their mindset, into their writing method. So there might be a method that someone says, and I think, oh, I'll give that a go. I'll try that out. Another way that it certainly is affecting me as a reader and thus as a writer is I am reading more widely because I am reading people to talk to them on the podcast. And I want to have a podcast that is representing horror as a whole, not just little facets. If I was reading purely for my personal taste, then I would be reading in a narrower way. I'd be reading more human horror. I would be reading just like dark satire with humor. I'd be mostly reading like Ryu Murakami, Haruki Murakami, maybe someone else Murakami, Chuck Palahniuk, John Niven, Caroline Kepnes. And like I feel reading other writers that I might not necessarily gravitate towards, it's showing me different ways to write. It's showing me different styles. It's teaching me more about the world. And so I think that can only be a good thing. So it has impacted me. And so sometimes though it can be difficult to say exactly how.
Right.
But I write every day. Once I've got a story ready to put out into the world, I do. I ship it. Whereas for a number of years, I was paralyzed with self-doubt. So I didn't show my work so often. I didn't even write as often, even though I'd always wanted to be a writer. And I kind of had a talking to myself that it's like, look, if you're a writer, then you write. If you don't want to be a writer, that's fine. But stop identifying as a writer if you're not going to write. And then that year, Ray Bradbury had said, it's impossible to write 52 bad short stories in a row. And I thought, well, there's a challenge, motherfucker. So
Let's give it a
I
shot.
decided to write a short story a week for an entire year. And then by the end of it, I had, I'd say you couldn't write 52 bad short stories in a row. There were probably consecutive bad short stories I wrote in a row. But if you write at that volume, then you have like a good bank to draw upon anyway. And the good thing about writing, I guess, prolifically, for want of a better word, is if I put a novel out and then some people don't enjoy that one, it almost doesn't matter because there's another one that's coming after that. So it becomes liberating. Now, if you take a more Thomas Harris approach and you only had like a few novels, well, now suddenly a lot is riding upon it. But if you're doing this as a lifelong pursuit, which I am, then you can experiment. You can take a risk or two. You can put out an extended dick joke of a novel called Daddy's Boy and just see what happens.
I want to show the cover really quick. I want to ask you about the cover. So who did the cover, and like, did you have input? Because I think it's really cool. There's a lot of kind of little Easter eggs on here from the cover itself.
The cover is done by the artist Vinnie Chung, and it's very important to me that I have a good cover for my book. So if I'm not putting the cover out myself, if I'm not putting the book out myself, then I ask the publisher if I can have some input with the cover. Cemetery Gates Media let me choose the cover artist. So I contacted Vinny. He's done various covers for, some writers you might know, like Stephen King and China Mieville and Joe Hill and Robert McCammon. And
Oh,
I
they
think
sound familiar.
Yeah, I think he's one
So
of the
a few of
best.
those, I recognize a few of those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's one of the best in the business. So I thought, you've done Stephen King. How about if you take it up to Michael David Wilson? And luckily he agreed. That would be a good career move. And so I sent him House of Bad Memories. He read it in its entirety. And then we discussed the cover concept. And I said, I want a load of Easter eggs. I want references to the book within the cover. There are a lot of references. There are so many, in fact, that soon we will be running a competition, and people who get the most references win prizes. So yeah, it was such a fun collaborative experience. But I mean, when I've worked with Pai Pa before, and then again with Vinnie Chung, I've been so lucky that they've both read whatever it is that they're doing the cover for.
That's cool.
That
I
is
don't feel
not-
like that happens very often.
Yeah, that is not the norm at all. That is not how it's normally done. But once they'd read it, it's like, well, like I have ideas for covers, but I'm not a cover artist. So I asked them, what are you thinking? What's your idea? And then, like, after they come up with a concept, then we go back and forth. Now I think with this one, like, I think Vinny did ask me early on if I had any ideas, and I did think like it would be cool to, of course, have the house. It's called House of Bad Memories.
Yeah.
So we've got a very kind of typical British.
Oh, wait. Is that the actual? I'm joking. Never mind. Is that the house of the? Never mind.
And then I thought it'd be good to have some sort of reference to Frank, whether it was him in the clouds, whether it was him standing there, and then let's have a ton of references too. And yeah, this is what we came up with, and I couldn't be happier.
That's a great cover. It's a lot to take in. The cover itself tells a story.
Yeah.
That pulls you in, and then
Yeah, I like how you have the beginning of the book on there. That's how the book starts out. Basically, is he sees Frank in the clouds.
Yeah.
So that's on there too. That's cool. And like all the little. I would read a couple chapters and go look at the covers. Like, oh, is any of this on the cover now? Find a few pieces here and there. It's like, okay, that's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, to enter that specific competition, people will have had to have read the book. So, like, I mean, we're kind of finalizing how we're gonna go about the competition, but I mean, one of the prizes will be like a framed, like, kind of piece of art signed by Vinnie Chung.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Then
that'll be cool.
I'll also be sending out signed copies of the paperback, and since I'm sending them from Japan, I'll put a few kind of Japan sweets and candy in, and just some little things.
Little prize package. Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So as we start to wind down and wrap this up here, give us your Brad usually asks this. I took your thunder. I'm sorry.
I always mean to do this at the beginning because I know what you're going to ask, and I always forget, and it's always like at the end.
Give us your elevator pitch, your sales pitch. Why should we grab this book? What are we going to get with this book? Sell it to us right now. Go.
Well, we are pitching House of Bad Memories as Funny Games meets This Is England with a Rosemary's Baby undertaste. It is for people who like Quentin Tarantino style dialogue heavy fiction. It has a lot of what the fuck moments. It switches genre. It is unpredictable. And I'm just going to jump into the synopsis right now because it's good, because I wrote it, because it's going to get you excited. So here we fucking go. From the author of The Girl in the Video comes a darkly comic thriller with an edge of your seat climax. Denny just wants to be the world's best dad to his baby daughter, but things get messy when he starts hallucinating his estranged, abusive stepfather, Frank. Then Frank winds up dead, and Denny is held hostage by his junkie half-sister who demands he uncovers the cause of her father's death. Will Denny defeat his demons or be perpetually tortured for refusing to answer impossible questions? House of Bad Memories is Funny Games meets This Is England with a Rosemary's Baby undertaste. It is available right now in paperback and ebook format from Cemetery Gates Media. And if you like audio, we got you covered because This Is Horror has just put out the audiobook House of Bad Memories, narrated by Aubrey Parsons. You can get it wherever good audiobooks are sold, and some bad audiobooks are sold there too, but not this one because this is fucking good. House of Bad Memories by Michael David Wilson. Buy it today.
You'll pay for the whole seat, but you only need the edge.
That's the best elevator pitch we've ever had on the show. That was great.
You told me I gotta sell it, so
There you go.
tell a motherfucker to sell, a motherfucker sells.
That's a perfect place to end it. That was a good wrap up there. Michael David Wilson, thank you so much for stopping by. We really appreciate it. Everyone in the chat, thanks so much. House of Bad Memories from Cemetery Gates Media, out now. Came out last Friday, right? A week ago.
Yes, it did.
Came out on Friday the 13th. Awesome. So pick it up. And don't jump to chapter 22.
I was just saying,
work
straight
your way,
to chapter 22.
work your way there before you get to chapter 22.
There's much more. It's a much better impact if you read the follow-up. Don't just dive straight into chapter 22.
Do that. But that's a wrap. Thanks so much, Michael, for agreeing to stop by and slum it with the Paper Cuts crew this time. So you can go back to your big time interviews and all that stuff. So thanks so much, everyone in chat. See ya. That's going to do it.
Thank you very much.
Michael,
bye, everybody.
Appreciate you coming on, Michael.
Great day. Thank you.
Jay. Love you, Jay.
I know you do.